Stu.
We're getting cozy.
Yeah, we're gonna get cozy.
All right.
Oh my God, my approach is totally broken.
Yeah.
It's confusing. You have launched a couple of campaigns that we've seen, but you were also in a unique situation of trying to evangelize an entire organization around the idea of an individual, of an expression. What were the lessons you took from that? You had some hardships too.
Well, yeah, so my situation was I was having this really unique opportunity being part of the SK2 team, but being kind of pitching a lot of their kind of work. So it was sort of like an in-house consultant. It's one of the examples, I guess, of this partnership mentality that I'm starting to follow. And it put me in where I could kind of work very closely with the team in order to start innovating ways to go forward. But all of these things were completely new for SK2, which was also part of P&G. So these were a lot of sacred cows involved being put on the chopping block. In terms of hardships, this is one of the reasons why kind of in the panel I was emphasizing how important it is to sort of know how aware and where the challenges are to build a digital marketing framework. If you don't have a very clear, if your client doesn't have a very clear idea of what they want to do in a big picture, it's very hard for them to feel confident about the small picture executions, especially if they're really aggressive. So you kind of have to take them to the pasture, help build that environment, and in some cases you need to co-create with them to actually help them get down to it and help them reconnect with consumers. And the very simple tactic that I've started using is when we talk about what consumers are doing or doing online, we actually pull it up real time. So if you're saying consumers are searching for a particular thing, let's look at it. Let's see what pages are trending naturally. That's the kind of content space you need to play on. Stop doing whatever else you're doing if it's not tied to that. Or if you're viewing content on, say, video, go look at what the videos look like. Start bringing the consumer into the room and use that as the foundation to address a lot of these bravery concerns.
It sounds simple, but it is so effective because if they can't see it or understand it, they have fear and a lack of trust. And so it solves both of those problems. Of course, everyone in the organization agreed with you, right?
None of the organization agreed with me. So I think there's a problem that's happening right now in the industry where we've experienced a technology shift as consumers, as people. You and me and everybody have seen stuff happen in the world that has completely transformed the way we operate on a day-to-day basis. Everything is different. There's not a single decision I make that's not somehow interacting with a computer or a digital technology or any one of the other innovations that have sort of come out in the last 20 years. Our consumers' lives has changed, and we as a marketing industry are basically tied to consumers. It's what we do. We talk to them, we find out ways to influence them, and we communicate with them. None of our systems have changed in the last 50 years. So already there's a disconnect between what's happening to consumers already and what's happening to us. We're choosing to look at digital as this other thing, this separate entity, when I've started coming to the realization that it's actually just transforming everything that we do, and we need to start not seeing it as a separate animal, but rather the animal itself. It's the only thing that is there right now. And even the way we think about TV should be influenced by a recognition that we live in the digital era versus going, TV can stay as it is, let's go now tackle this other thing. So that was a lot of what happened. But prototyping, what I was talking about before, was a great way to start helping people do this. Because the truth is, we're all at a stage as an industry where everyone knows digital is important. The problem is the systems that we're using right now are not designed to support a digital era. Everything from our organization to how we hire talent to how we work as a agency media structure with brands and how brands internally organize isn't really built to equip with this. And when you're running one system for another world, there's an old saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So that's what we're constantly doing. We're using the wrong tool for the job. And prototyping is a great way to get people to try out radical new ways of doing business in very small ways. And they create this momentum and this excitement and this sense that we're starting to get it that makes it easier to have that scale up. So for my work on influencers, for example, it started from an observation. 65% of all consumer purchases for beauty were because of a blogger's recommendation. So I saw that statistic when I was doing some early work of the landscape for SK2, and I was fascinated by it. That seemed like an incredibly...
What percent?
65. So it's like you get this person to influence, to say, hey, it's pretty good, and most people who saw that will buy. That seems like a pretty good return. If I had an ad copy when I was back making TVCs that had that kind of persuasiveness, I would air that all the time and I wouldn't do anything else. So I started asking the SK2 team, well, what are we doing with bloggers? What's happening? And it largely was an afterthought because we had grouped influencers for digital at the end of the spectrum of our plans and executions tied to when we go do PR. So versus bringing them into the front, we were kind of dealing with them at the end once we had figured out our campaign, our proposition, everything like that. So the thought was, well, how do we work with these guys? And I started recognizing that a lot of their currency and trade was around authenticity and being authentic. And the only way of working with them that brands had established so far was the pay or pray model. Let's pay them some money and make them do something exactly the way we want.
And pray.
Or no, the pray model is where you invite them over to an event and you just hope that they talk about you, which tends to be more about what happened at the event than anything to do with your product. They weren't working because the sponsorship model, while it got you great results, everyone saw through and saw as not authentic, and that started becoming damaging for influencers and damaging for the brands because nobody likes to be deceived. So we had to come up with another way, and that's where the thinking started becoming, well, what if we work as a partnership with them? We kind of say, what can we do as a brand to help out influencers, get them access to really cool content, and not force them to write anything that they don't want to. Literally say, whatever you do is fine, we just want to kind of work together. And that was the original idea. It was a Skype call to a couple of creators where I pitched them. They said, sure. We came up with some ways of doing things, and it sort of scaled up from there. And now it's a multi-million-dollar program.
Yeah, it was an awesome case study. Influencer marketing,
yeah,
easy, no real bumps in the road, right?
It's funny. The actual, the power of influencer marketing, I think, becomes apparent when you actually really understand the influencers you're trying to influence, which sounds radical, but is actually something we didn't do until we started getting into this space and realized what bloggers were all about. And I think the second part of it was getting permission from the companies and clients to work this way. So my barriers were actually more to do with getting it done than actually working with creators. Creators themselves were actually incredibly reasonable and easy to work with. I think our program has about a 97% closure rate in terms of who we want and getting them to say yes. And we haven't had any issues with loyalty and long-term partnership in the model. So it's been really, really successful, but part of it's been because I flowed with what they were telling me. So they say, hey, I don't want to work on anything exclusive. I want to be able to have editorial rights to my content because I don't want to be seen as insincere. And that means that if I want to feature competitive product in the video, I want to be able to. I didn't even let that become a discussion because up front I said that's how we want to work with you. And we don't want you to do any video that you don't feel is a contribution to your channel that helps you get more audience or help satisfy your audience. And I would sometimes actually turn down pitches that I got from my marketing side teams because it didn't fit what the program should be about. So I took it really, really seriously that we needed to flow in the way that the world was moving, and I refused to compromise on that, even if it meant a loss of business or a loss of projects, or not working with certain creators who only would work for money.
Understood. Those are not easy meetings. One of the challenges they're going to face, who's going to take over the program?
I think succession planning.
Team?
So succession planning was great. So I have one of my people who was on the team is taking it forward, and when you build something with your two hands, you want to help it out. So it's a little bit of this. And a lot of the program, one of the things that was fantastic about working this way, James, was you kind of flow with it. You want to make it a success. It's fun to work on. And you find yourself personally putting in the time. And I found that happening with creators. I found that happening with my PR agency who helped me out. With even the brand team, it sort of has this infectious quality when you feel like you're actually doing real marketing again. You're touching people's lives. You're really making a difference. So I'm going to help out if they ever need anything or they run into some trouble, but I'm very confident with the team that they've put in place because I trained them by doing. No one has this capability to start off with because it didn't exist 12 months ago. So it was just the people on the team that fortunately could carry it forward.
It's one of the important lessons as you activate these types of ideas. You can't turn them off, right? So don't think that it's something that happens and then you stop and then you bring it up again. It's not that kind of a strategy. It's an always on, it'll be forever. So those relationships are business partnerships.
Yeah.
You can't stop them or you'll impact the brand.
And I think people sense that. Like a lot of the time creators, it's quite sad. The creator environment right now is full of a lot of people who are trying to take advantage of creators, or only interested in the number of subscribers that they have and not, treating them as brands or as partners or properties themselves. And I think that's a real shame, because they are going to become brands that play with influencer spaces. And it's something that sort of like when we were working with Michelle, she called out also as a really big and important point, that these creators need to be treated with a lot of respect and taken seriously. And that long-term approach and everything that sort of Bing's been talking about and we've been chatting about comes down to sort of having the humility as a brand and having the humility as a team of brands and agencies to recognize the world as it is and embrace the fact that we're one part of a bigger whole. The consumer's in charge, we've got to figure out how to make her happy, but working with a creator on a platform of equals is one of those things that I see as a legacy for what hopefully SK2 will take forward.
Yeah. What are the first things that you would advise someone who is looking at engaging creators?
Okay, so know what you're trying to probably engage on and who you're after. I think, a lot of the time the conversation about creators is taken to the who's got the biggest subscriber number, let's go for that person. Or who's the cheapest, let's work with them. I think those are mistakes. You've got to really get a vibe for who they're talking to, who their audience is, what's the overlap, what's your proposition as you go and work with them. And try to avoid taking the sponsorship route, not because creators won't take your money, they will, but the ones that do are probably not the ones you want to work with because they're not going to be around in the long term, because they're not trying to build something up. So look for creators who are kind of have a vision for themselves and see themselves as growing further, or help work with them to help create a vision for themselves if they're junior and sort of starting off and are on that trajectory.
Absolutely. Ones that you would have over for dinner, right?
That certainly helps, yeah.
It's got to be a relationship. You've got to understand and love who they are for what they do and why they love what they love.
And if you haven't watched their content and can't talk intelligently about what they do, you're also not ready to talk to a creator. You should love their content. You should be into what they're doing as a brand and as a fan, so you can be authentic when you say that you really want to work with them, because it makes sense for you and what you're trying to do.
One of the lessons that I took to heart with all of these types of activities, they work best when you listen first. You had a comment about that, because usually people looking, they go, no, I want to engage. But why is it critical to listen first?
I think it comes down to, the thing that I've found is the biggest problem in the industry right now is we're refusing to sort of take a moment to pause and figure it out. The world's complex now, and we're all very scared about throwing a ton of money after something that might completely blow up in our faces.
You've got money?
I have no money. I'm talking about SK2, unfortunately.
Okay.
But and my other clients, they all have this kind of issue where they're like, how do I bet hard on something? Because I know I need to, and I know digital is important, but I don't know what that is. Taking the moment to listen and start building co-creatively with your team a new framework for what you want to do as a brand is what's really going to help you take it forward. And because it gives you the confidence to sort of invest, and also a structure in terms of how do I look at this content. If you know what this content or activation is supposed to do, where it's going to be placed, what its key measure is going to be because it accomplishes a goal that takes you to the next step in my ecosystem, you're able to be very intelligent in how you prototype, in how you scale that up, and also in terms of how you sell that into the organization. And if they've gone with you on this journey, and they need to, because this is not a one-size-fits-all proposition, then you're really cooking with gas. And you're able to address a lot of the things that I think are holding back our industry in terms of selling what we know is right, and in terms of clients, in terms of investing and changing themselves. Unfortunately, all of what I just said requires us to throw out 50 years of system-based processes and thinking. So that's the only downside. We have to totally change how we do everything.
Transition. There was actually a question from the audience that was up here. Is embedding storytelling the way to engage or bring the consumer closer? Can I get the question back up, please? I know you've got it. Okay. Is embedding storytelling the way forward to emotionally touch the consumer?
I'm not sure I understand what embedding storytelling means. I think what you want to do is ideally talk to consumers in a way that you would as a real person. A lot of actually what I do with clients in terms of workshops is the first thing that I do is say, okay, I'm interested, I'm going through your ecosystem in one of the free points. Maybe I'm searching for what's the best skincare, for instance, if I'm working with SK2. What are you going to tell me? This is my question. So if you're trying to emotionally engage me with a story at that point, you're not really adding any value. You're not helping me out. You've got to answer my question first. And that's one of the things that we fall apart on. We try and look for this one-size-fits-all model once again, when actually what we should be doing is, what does she want to know? And let's intervene there and deliver that answer. If I'm interrupting her, like I'm trying to talk to her with some paid advertising, or which is mostly the only way to interrupt her these days, then I probably do want to be entertaining, but I should probably recognize what context she's in as she's doing this and be realistic about what I can accomplish. So if she's on her mobile and I'm doing pre-roll, I probably don't want a 2-3 minute video, because she's probably pulling out her phone and trying to view a video because she wants to see something real quick, or she wants to entertain her friends. That's probably better for a PC buy. So thinking with your ecosystem first helps you out a lot in terms of what kind of content goes where. I think it also helps in terms of what's my objective. You'll feel a lot better about putting storytelling content up in key points of the ecosystem if you don't expect a buy now purchase at the end of it. If you expect her to go, okay, that was nice, and maybe next time I'm actually thinking about shopping your category, I will check you out, or I will remember your brand. If that's all you're asking for, embedding storytelling is a fantastic thing to do. But if she's actually asking you what's the best skincare, tell her it's you and find a way to convince her that's credible.
Be real. Thank you, Stu. Can we get a hand for Stu? I know what would fix the industry. More people like Stu.
Thanks a lot.